Okay, everybody, welcome to another week of SAI Fellows program. I'm very excited. Time is going by so quickly. I cannot believe it. Pitch day will be along us very shortly. And so as we get close to the end of the program, we're trying to bring things together, right? So you guys can see the full picture of things that are being launched. So today I'm super excited to have Marley Parker here with us. As I told you all last week, I met Marley at Science Talk. And that conference has just been a whirlwind of people that I've met, and it's been so exciting. And when I was there, and when she was giving her talk and really just telling her story in informal science and all her expeditions that she's done and the key points in time when she made a decision, right, to commit to doing this work, I was inspired and I knew I had to talk to her, and here we are all those weeks later. It's just amazing to see that. And so I knew that I wanted her to come by and lead us in this discussion, tell her story, and then lead us in this discussion about just doing this work out there on the field. As you all are getting close to that point where you are launching or launched or relaunching, I think it's great to just see how all of it comes together or can come together, what the challenges are, and what are those things that we as a community can do better and to support each other. Okay, so this will be fairly informal. Marley will give her talk for a little bit, and then it will be open-ended discussion. Heads up that there might be some cold calling here and there. I have to give you a warning, but you guys are used to it by now because you know I do that all the time. So there'll be nothing new there, but this will be an active discussion. As I mentioned earlier, we will have some residents, I hope, that will stop by. So they will also jump in the conversation and share whatever piece that they have. And so with that, Marley, it's I'm really honored to have you with us. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Fanuel. I assume everybody can hear me okay? We're good? Okay, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. I loved meeting Fanuel at the Science Talk conference, and I'm really stoked to tell my story again today with y'all. What the main thing I'll be talking about is just a bit of the story of my career thus far, but specifically focusing on the most transformative part of my career, which was when I decided to quit a perfectly good, stable job and pursue starting my own business as a freelance science communicator. So this started back in, let's see, get moving here. In 2018, I had been working at UNC Chapel Hill as a science communicator in the Office of Research Communications for about 5 years. And I was working as both a photographer, a videographer, and a writer. And my job basically included going out with different scientists and research teams associated with the university, and I would document the work they were doing. So I would join fieldwork projects in places like Belize, as you can see here. I also got to travel to California and Ecuador and all kinds of amazing places to document science. This job also, it was a full-time state employee position. So I had a really good salary. I had a 401k, benefits, all of that. And I had no intention of leaving any of those things. But at the end of 2017, I got an offer from outside of the university from a group of researchers, and I felt like it was an offer I could not say no to. This team of researchers approached me and asked if I would be interested in documenting their expedition in Antarctica. The expedition would involve almost 2 months of living and working on a ship in the Antarctic Peninsula. And my role on the team would be to film and photograph these scientists as they were collecting data on whales down there. So obviously this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. But in order to do it, I had to quit my full-time job at the university. I could not go spend 2 months at the bottom of the world and also maintain my position at UNC. So I had to make a choice. I did not want to leave my really good job, but I also did not want to pass up this incredible opportunity to work in Antarctica. So I made the decision to leave my job and to start my own business as a full-time freelance science communicator. I was obviously really excited about going to Antarctica, but I was really nervous about becoming self-employed and starting my own business for the first time ever. Um, and I didn't know if it was going to work out. I didn't know if I was making the right decision. But that all happened 4 years ago. And since then, I'm very happy to say that it's worked out pretty well. In addition to going to Antarctica, I have joined several other expedition teams in places like the South Pacific and the North Atlantic. I've worked with all of these organizations producing science stories and content, and I'm really happy. I really love doing this work and specializing in working with expedition teams in remote places around the planet. And even though quitting my job and starting my own business was one of the scariest things I've ever done, it's also been one of the most empowering experiences of my life. And I'm really excited to share a little bit about what I've learned with y'all today. So 2 months after I got back from Antarctica, I flew across the country to a port in San Diego and boarded this research vessel, and then spent the rest of the summer working with a team of oceanographers in the North Pacific. And something a lot of people don't know is the daily operating cost of a research vessel like this one is between $40,000 and $50,000 each day. The percentage of that daily operating budget that goes to my paycheck is around 0.01%. So I'm talking about the business side of running my own business, and specifically handling the finances of managing a business for the first time. And I have to be honest, this was one of the things that stressed me out the most when I was considering leaving my full-time job and my full-time salary and becoming a freelancer. The idea of managing my own finances and running a business was really daunting. I have always been a creative person. I'm a photographer and a writer. I am not a numbers person. I've never been particularly good at math. So I was really kind of stressed about handling this. But I think when it comes to being a full-time freelancer and being successful, it's not so much about being the most business savvy person in the world. It's more about being able to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses. And since I knew at the outset that, finances and numbers and charts and graphs and all those things were just not my strong suit, one of the first things I did was hire an accountant. And my accountant is awesome. She is also a woman in her early 30s, and she also runs her own business. So she gets it. And having her professional guidance really helped to kind of calm my nerves on the financial front when I was starting out. And that was really important because one of the reasons I was so nervous was I didn't have much money in the bank. I had been working a good job full time for several years, but I had never been really great about saving money. So when I quit my job and started this, I only had a couple $1,000s in the bank, which was just barely enough to cover rent and bills for 2 or 3 months if I didn't get work for a while. But I did have a couple other things going for me. I was not in debt. I didn't own a house, and I don't have children. So I knew with all of those factors, I could afford to take at least some degree of financial risk. And obviously that sort of financial self-assessment is totally different for everybody, depending on who you are and where you are in life. But I do think making that self-assessment is really important for anybody considering a freelance career path. And for me, the most important thing was not allowing my fears and insecurities around managing finances not allowing that to get in my way or to stop me from chasing after this dream of starting my own business. So when, let's see, between the Antarctica expedition and the back-to-back expeditions I did in the North Pacific, I spent just over 100 days living and working at sea in 2018. So during my very first year of freelance work, I spent a lot of time out in the open ocean. And one of the things I learned during that time was when a ship is going through rough weather, you'll hear members of the crew say, "hold fast." And hold fast is an old nautical term that means to literally lash something down or to tightly secure something. It also means to continue to adhere to or believe in an idea or principle. And when I was first putting this presentation together, I originally had a slide here that was something like the basics of branding yourself, which just felt kind of boring and superficial and not really my style. And since I do spend a lot of time going out to sea and working directly with ocean scientists, a phrase like "hold fast" felt a lot more appropriate for the type of communicator I am and the type of work that I do. And that's what I'm talking about here is the importance of establishing a professional identity and establishing a professional brand and then sticking to that. And for me, and when I was starting out with my business, that was actually not quite as straightforward as I thought it would be. I obviously had a lot of experience working directly with teams of scientists, but I also had experience in photographing rock climbers and mountaineers and ultra marathon runners. I had done a lot of different kind of extreme outdoor activities and taken my camera along for those. So I thought maybe I could go back and forth between doing science communication work and then also working with folks in the outdoor industry. Long story short, it took me about a year to figure out that trying to break into the world of like commercial outdoor brands and big corporations there was not really what I wanted to be doing. And that working directly with scientists and with scientists on their, as part of their research teams was work that I found to be much more fulfilling and also a lot more consistent than trying to work in the outdoor industry. So now when you go to my website and see the work that I have showcased there, it is all about science. And it is very clear that I am a professional science communicator and I specialize in documenting expeditions and research in these remote places around the planet. I think the website stuff is another area where people can get a little stressed out when it comes to setting this up or getting this going for your own thing. Kind of like the finance stuff was for me, the website stuff can just be totally overwhelming for some folks. And what I like to remind people is you don't have to be a website expert to have a really nice professional website showcasing your work. There are plenty of people who will set up a website for you that you can hire. There are also plenty of platforms online that you can use to create a really nice website without having, a bunch of coding experience or being an IT expert. So the bottom line I tell people is you don't have to be an IT whiz or a website magician, but you do really need to know who you are and what professional value you have to offer to people and make that incredibly clear on your website. When I first started telling people that I was quitting my job and starting my own business, I tried to be very intentional about how I talked about it. As I've told y'all just now, I was super nervous. I had never done anything like this before. I really didn't know what I was doing. But when I talked about it, I tried to push aside all that nervous energy that I had in my head and to present myself as confidently and professionally as I could in every conversation I had, whether it was just with friends or acquaintances or whoever. And one of those conversations happened to be just at a party with some mutual friends. I bumped into a PhD marine biologist that I had actually met briefly while I was working at UNC. And I said hello, and I told her that I was starting my own business as a freelance science communicator. And she said, "That's really cool." And we chatted for a while, and that was it for that evening. But a few months later, she got in touch with me and asked if I would be interested in documenting her coral reef conservation research in the Florida Keys. So I ended up going to Florida with her 4 different times, produced a series of videos and photo essays and blog posts about her research and the work that she was doing on coral reef conservation down there. And all of that happened simply because I was brave enough to talk about myself and talk about that I'm a competent science communicator at a party. And, having that experience and having multiple occasions where I could talk about the work that I do, explain myself in a professional context, that was really good practice for when I had to introduce myself and present myself to some of the really higher up people in my field. And one of those occasions happened at the Ocean Sciences meeting in San Diego in February of 2020. I attended a talk given by Ken Costell, who is the director of communications at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And after the talk, I walked up to introduce myself to Ken, but I was really nervous because in the world of oceanography, Woods Hole is like the top of the top. And I had been told by some of my other colleagues that Woods Hole was also like an old boys club. And if you didn't know someone there, or if you didn't have a direct connection, there's no way you could get hired or contracted there. So when I walked up to Ken, I gave him a brief description of who I am and what I do. And I told him I would really like to work for Woods Hole, but I have been told that your organization will not hire someone like me. I did not just politely ask if he might consider hiring me in the future. I challenged him to hire me. And it was a very bold move, but it was a bold move that would eventually pay off in a big way. Exactly a year later, so now February of 2021, I hit a bit of a low point. Obviously, during all of 2020, I had several expeditions that were canceled or postponed indefinitely due to COVID. And by the time the beginning of 2021 rolled around, I was really questioning whether or not I could continue making research expeditions the main focus of my work. So I applied for a local position at NC State University. They were looking to hire a part-time science communications manager, and the position would involve reporting on agriculture science, which was pretty far removed from the world of ocean science that I had really come to know and love. But the position included regular work and a guaranteed paycheck. So I was like, I'm going to go for it. I went through a couple rounds of interviews, and then I got offered the position. I was perfectly qualified for it, probably overqualified for it. But the same day that I got offered the position from NC State, I got an email from Ken at Woods Hole. And he reminded me that we had met at the Ocean Sciences Conference a year earlier, like I would forget. And he asked if I would be interested and available to document a Woods Hole expedition off the coast of Spain. And again, we're still in the midst of COVID times, so doing this expedition in Spain would require a 2-week quarantine and multiple COVID tests, and lots of travel restriction stuff. But it was the work that I really, really wanted to be doing. So I politely declined the job offer from NC State, and I started packing my bags to go to Spain and to eventually go back out to sea. Getting both of those offers on the exact same day almost felt like a sign, or at least like a really solid reminder that I always have a choice. I could at any point choose to go back to having a traditional full-time job at a university or some other institution. Or I can choose to persist with being a full-time freelance science communicator and to persist through all of the unknowns that come with that. So, for example, not knowing when I will be asked to join an expedition, or not knowing how much money I'm going to make in 1 year, or not being able to make plans with friends and family because I literally don't know when or if I'll be in the country. All of those unknowns pose big challenges, and they can make my life feel kind of hectic and crazy at times. But they also create space for me to be able to participate in these incredibly unique opportunities. I think that this type of career path and this type of lifestyle is not for everyone. But if you can accept the unpredictable nature of the work, it can take you to some pretty incredible places. So that is what I've got for y'all, at least the little condensed version of my career story. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I would love to talk about anything that you guys are curious about. Ask me any sort of question you want.
Yay. Thank you, Marley, for that. And this is great because it sets the stage for us then to dig deep in some of the areas that she talked about. And I do want to mention that one of our residents, Caroline, and former fellow, is here with us as well. Hi, Caroline. So she can definitely chime in as we have these conversations about, launching these initiatives, and especially those key decision points, right, Marley? You mentioned where you're deciding, okay, I'm going to do this, how am I going to do that finance thing? I don't know anything about it. How do I proceed on that? So as all of you know, I always have a million questions, but I will hold back as much as I can and provide space for you all to ask questions. And I hope you have lots of them, because now, you get to see me, what kind of questions I ask. So the floor is open, and Marley as well can ask you guys questions. So be ready for that. Okay. Okay. The floor is open. Kaylee.
If you don't mind me asking, what did you do for like insurance when you switched over to freelance?
Yeah, this was one of the questions I got at the conference too. Insurance is tough. It goes in line with the financial stuff. It's a pain to sort that out when you're fully self-employed. My health insurance is through the healthcare marketplace. I pay too much money for crappy insurance, to be honest, but I'm really fortunate that I'm in pretty good health and I don't have any, big medical issues. I wouldn't be able to go to sea and do the work that I do if I did have severe chronic health issues, because I have to pass pretty stringent medical exams to be able to go out to sea. If you have like a heart condition or cancer or any sort of thing like that, then they rarely will let you go out to sea. And that's just a, basic safety thing. So yeah, I've had to deal with getting my own insurance, both for health insurance and for all of my camera gear as well. And that is a big cost, and it's a pain. But again, it's something that I think it's worth it to have the freedom and flexibility that I have.
Cool.
Yeah.
Emily.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was so interesting, and that sounds like such an amazing job. I'm just curious, so how did people initially reach out to you, like for Antarctica and for other expeditions? How do scientists find you and stuff? Because yeah, I was kind of interested in doing that stuff like that, maybe going on expeditions, but it seems so hard. Like, how did you get to work with NASA and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a huge part of the reason that I got to go to Antarctica, and then, Antarctica kind of opened the doors to other opportunities afterwards. But a big part of that was because I had worked as a full-time science communicator at UNC for 5 years. And I specifically spent a lot of time working at our Institute of Marine Sciences, which is on the coast of North Carolina. And as soon as I figured out that my job would pay me to go to the beach and take photos of like sea turtles and sharks and fish, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. So I started kind of gearing or leaning, shifting, I don't know what the verb is, kind of just, shifting my career interest to specifically marine science and ocean science before I even left my position at UNC. And one of the scientists that I worked with at UNC who was, very involved in their ocean science, her husband was the Antarctica researcher that I went and did that expedition with. So that was kind of just a personal connection there. I do get this question a lot, and I think it is really important to highlight that, I had at least 5 years of professional experience working at an institution where I was able to make a lot of connections and meet a lot of people and get a lot of experience. I really don't know that I would have been able to have these kinds of opportunities if I had tried to do that just like straight out of school with no network in place. It really is the type of thing where it's helpful to know people. And then I just kept expanding my network as I've gone and, been full-time freelance. I go to conferences and I walk straight up to people and introduce myself. And, if I can just get a foot in the door, I have the background and the experience to back it up. It's just a matter of, actually getting to meet people in person, I think makes a big difference.
Caroline, from your perspective, also similar question. How have you gotten out connecting with people, or introducing them about your initiative? Maybe you should tell people a quick thing about what your project is, and then address Emily's question really about just putting yourself out there. I think Marley, this is what you mentioned earlier. You put yourself out there, and it's very uncomfortable, really, really uncomfortable, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
Caroline.
All right. I think I would definitely echo Marley in some ways, but first let me say my initiative is called Museum Zines, which is using zine making. If you're not familiar with the zine, let me grab one right now. They're pretty much just little booklets. Oh no, it's blurring. But they're like mini comics. They can be made with just a single page of printer paper, so really accessible in terms of a way of a medium. And my initiative was to use zine making as a way for middle grade, high school students to pretty much process and synthesize their museum experiences and use this as a way to say, like, address questions that you can ask by looking at museum specimens. And I'm gonna do this in collaboration with the Harvard Museum of Natural History. To echo what Marley said though, I'm currently a postdoc at Harvard, and so I just drew upon the existing network, and then they've been really generous in terms of like pretty much helping me then advertise that there's a podcast that the museum runs, for example. And I had been doing this for a few weeks, and the podcast person was like, "Hey, you just want to talk about the podcast?" And I just said yes.
Was that Jenny Berglund?
Yes.
Yeah, she's great. I've sailed with her. That's awesome.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. So take advantage of what's around you right now, and don't be afraid to say yes, even though it can be really excruciating to say, like, hear your voice played back to you. Things like that. You'll survive. Just go for it.
Totally. Yeah.
And Marley, in terms of audience, right? So Caroline mentioned our audience, right? Middle school students. From your side, who's your primary audience? Who do you cater to? You have scientists here, but then they're getting the communication out to somebody, right? So I'm just curious, who are the audiences that you are interested in?
That's a really good question. I think my target audience is evolving as I grow and evolve in the work that I do. I think when I started out, my first year or two was really figuring out, okay, I'm going to focus in on showing that I'm an experienced science communicator that can work in remote places. That was my main goal, is proving that I'm competent and capable of doing this very specialized type of work. And so, my website reflects that of, here I've been to this place and this place, and I've worked with this different number of research teams. with the target audience being researchers that I haven't worked with before can come to my website and read about the work that I've done and, see the different people I've worked with and get a good feel for my experience. But now that I've been doing this for over 4 years now, and I'm not just getting, offers to join expeditions, I'm getting offers to speak at conferences or to speak with a wonderful group of people like you all. So now I'm working on gearing some of my content more to, to students, to other science communicators, to people who are really interested in hearing my story and learning from it and taking something from it. And so I think it is really important to recognize that, you can have one target audience in your mind, and then that can potentially grow and shift and change as you grow and evolve, as a professional in your career.
Great. Tanya.
Hey there, Marley. Thank you so much for joining us today. Such an amazing talk and really cool that you get to do all of this stuff. I have a couple questions. The first one is, you mentioned that you can travel and work like anywhere in the world. You went to Spain and everything. How does that work in terms of taxes? Just because I recently moved from California to Michigan, and doing taxes half the year in one place and half the year in another place within the United States was confusing as is. So are there any hurdles that you had to overcome with respect to that? And I'll save my other question.
Yeah. No, that's really why I have an accountant. She handles all that crap for me. I was telling somebody recently, the best money I spend all year is the couple $100 I pay my accountant to sort through all of that paperwork and all of my stuff for me. I do file my taxes in the state of North Carolina, and you'd have to ask my accountant for the details on it. Again, this is not my area of expertise. I did have one instance where I had to also file in California because one of the organizations I worked for was based there, but it was just another piece of paperwork that I had to fill out. Definitely not fun, definitely not my main area of expertise. And that's why I have an accountant, and I really appreciate her. That's the basic answer I have for that.
And that's for your business, right? Because ML Parker Media is a business, right?
Yeah. So ML Parker Media is my LLC.
Right.
And that has also been a really important distinction to have as an independent contractor. A lot of organizations especially do not want to hire you unless you have an LLC. So that is an important thing to note.
Right. And then, of course, here, some people, I think Britannia, for example, you're following a nonprofit path, right? There are different modalities, right? And you guys may remember the L3C, for example, is another modality, social entrepreneurship space that is there. Very confusing. Not all states accept it. But to your point, Tanya, I think this is where you're not going to know everything you want, right? And you have to be willing to ask the hard questions and say, I don't know this, right? Don't try to just do and think, I know everything. No, it's some point you'll be stuck, and you need to ask for help as well. So Emily.
Yeah, so I totally agree with I think it's really good advice to just kind of be bold and go up to people, because that's how I got involved with SAI. Even I met Daniel at a conference and just called and was like, I want to work for Stories in Science. But I'm just curious. So in terms of the expeditions, did you have to get your own? Because was it just funding through the project? The scientists had a budget, and then they were looking to hire somebody to do the communication and take photos, or did you have to apply to grants and secure your own funding for that? If a PI wanted to work with you or invite you on the expedition, did you have to kind of figure out how you were going to be funded, or was that in their budget already?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's different for the different organizations and teams that I work with. For the first Antarctica expedition, I was invited to do that specifically because they had a National Science Foundation grant, and the NSF grant included a broader impacts section. I don't know if y'all are familiar with broader impacts or if y'all have talked about that, but I think it's a pretty standard component of most National Science Foundation grants and other science grants now. And the broader impacts section is basically all about, how are you going to get your science out into the world? How is this going to help educate people? What are the broader impacts of your research? How do you, expand it to the rest of the world and make it accessible? And so that is in a couple different instances, that has been how and why I've been invited to join these research teams. Is I'm basically their broader impacts component, and they have a couple $1,000s reserved for that specific part of the grant. And then for some of the other organizations I work with, like the Ocean Exploration Trust or the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, they have specific contract positions that they hire people for seasonally or pretty regularly. And they say, yeah, you come out and you are the expedition photographer, and that, they just have their organization has funding for that specific position on the ship for each expedition they do. And maybe I'm the photographer, the videographer, a couple different roles, the communications person, whatever that title ends up being, but that is just a set contracted position at different organizations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Hopefully things looks frozen. Oops. But I think this is an interesting point, a kind of a funding model, right? That if it's something that's already assigned, and it's easier for you to be plugged into something, right? And Caroline, for you, I'm just curious, do you, like, what's your, right now, what are your costs and how are you operating? I'm curious. Do you have a thing? Is it entity, or are you still open?
My costs?
No, in terms of what's your organization around your zines? Is there a structure, formality that you've created around it, or is it still something that's brewing and you don't know where it's gonna go?
It's still, yeah, in pretty fetal stages, I will say. But I do plan on becoming an LLC myself, well, for my comics and artwork.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing where you make that decision point and then figuring out, what am I going to do this? What are the costs associated, right, Marley? And as you mentioned earlier, you hate the finance side, right? And then you have someone do it. And so that, I think, it is scary. You use this word, right? It can be scary. But again, you don't have to sort of be by yourself. And if you're running, for example, a nonprofit or trying to set one up, same fears come in, right? Am I going to be able to do this? And am I going in over my head? So it can be a big challenge. So I see Tanya's hand again, but is anybody else that wants to jump in?
I have a question. This is about like honing your craft when it comes to the videos that you made and the photos. I'm at your website right now. Like, how do you assess, like, what's a successful set of photos for an expedition, or say like a 2-minute video? Like, how do you assess success, I guess?
Great question.
Yeah. I definitely, over the years, so, I was in my position at the university for 5 years. Before that, I had a couple other positions at nonprofits and things. But I should say my degree, my education and degree from college is just a bachelor's degree in photojournalism. So I am a trained professional photographer, and I learned that in school. And I have, continued to develop my photo and video skills over the years, and, in these different environments. So I think, in a nutshell, if I had to think about what really characterizes great photos and video clips from an expedition, they are clips that show, the nature of the work, exactly what we're doing, out at sea, kind of. And I really love the, I'm still just such a sucker for like the adventure of it all, so I really want to show, here we are heading out to sea, and here's this epic sunset. And, I try to show the context of where the science is happening in these wild places, and then also really show the scientists themselves as human beings, as fallible individuals who are not perfect. I think a lot of the issues we run into in science communication in a broad general sense is people feeling disconnected from scientists, feeling like scientists just sit up in their ivory towers with their PhDs and they're not like normal humans. So especially when you're living and working together on a ship, you get to know people really well, really quickly. And I try in my work to show the different personalities and the, different character traits that make these scientists very hardworking and more relatable people than you might see just from a published paper or from a lab's website or something like that. So really trying to bring out the human element and, show how challenging it is to do science at sea and the challenges that these people are regularly overcoming to make that happen. Those are all elements that I try to incorporate into my storytelling out there.
And then the audience there is who for that content?
It depends again on the organization, but that could be, all kinds of people. Let's say I produce a video for a specific lab or research group. Then they might share that video on their website, which could be used as a tool to attract future graduate students or collaborators or funding opportunities. A lot of times my videos do get used in grant applications. They say, here's a description of our work, but if you want to really see what we're doing and how awesome it is, check out this video. It can also just be something that we take into classrooms to share with students to get them excited about pursuing careers in science. Look at how awesome it is to go out on a ship and do science in the ocean. So again, it really depends on which project and which organization. There's a lot of different potential audiences, but I do think a lot of the content I produce can be carried over between all these different audiences. I, try to make it accessible and relatable to a wide variety of people.
Yeah, and hopefully all of you can notice what I'm asking Marley here. In the logic model, right, you have your outputs and outcomes, right? Caroline is smiling from many months ago when we went through this. And I think that's interesting, right? Where you can build even a dashboard, right? You can, I don't know if you do this, Marley, where you track, for example, really, how are my videos being used, right? And then beginning to map out that impact sort of platform. Because one big challenge in this space is really ascertaining that impact, right? And how do you evaluate it? How do you know if what you're doing is having an impact, right? Of course, you can track, am I getting the contracts? Yes. But really the ultimate end of the day kind of thing is this thing having the intended impact, right? Whether it's on the scientist or on the whatever user, as you said, because you have very diverse audiences. Tanya, thank you for being so patient. Go ahead.
Of course, I wanted to sort of piggyback on what Caroline was asking about. I was looking through your website, and since a lot of your communication is done in like through your speaking engagements, you're a photographer, videographer, and also a writer. Something that we've been focusing a lot is like how we're going to communicate our initiative or programming to our stakeholders. So I guess my question is, since you've done many different things in terms of as a way to communicate your message, what would you say has been maybe the most productive way in which you found you can communicate the message? And does this change by who your target audience might be? Like, are videos maybe better suited for this target audience as opposed to maybe something that you write or a speaking event? And I guess, how do you assess that?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I do think each of the different types of content I've produced have been effective in, each of their realms. I'd have to say recently, with the doing so many more speaking engagements in the past 6 months or the past year, that has been an incredibly effective way to really establish connections with people. The reason I'm here today is because I spoke at that conference and Fanuel came up to me right afterwards, and I've had many other, I just spoke on a podcast from somebody else I met at that conference, and I'm going to do another podcast interview next week. And so I think one of the most, if I think just, what's the most effective way of communicating who I am and what I do, recently, it has definitely revolved around some of my speaking engagement stuff. But I don't know. You never know sometimes where it sounds like y'all do a very definitive mapping out of who you want your audiences to be and where, your targeted places for your content to go. But in my experience, you never know who might see what you're putting out there. I have a blog on my website, which I keep it for myself because I want to remember these different experiences I've had. But, I've had people out of the blue tell me they're reading my blog, and that's everyone from professional colleagues to my boyfriend's coworker's wife is reading my blog. Like who knew? So yeah, I don't know. That's not answering your question, I don't feel like, but that's just been my experience with some of the content I've made. I guess it really just comes down to what do you feel most comfortable with? I'm still really kind of coming into this professional public speaker role and figuring out what that looks like and what kinds of stories I tell people are most effective for, communicating these messages that we're talking about today. Whereas I've been producing videos and taking photos for over a decade now. So I know how to do that. That's, that's easy. And that's kind of just like a basic fundamental skill set I have. But it seems like there might be a little bit more to the public speaking communication, at least for my work and what I'm doing. Is that helpful at all? I don't know if I answered your question at all.
Definitely helpful. And I guess a follow-up question would be, have you ever had to alter maybe the way in which you communicate something for a different audience, even though it's the same information? So let's say you write something up and then you do a presentation elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I've definitely done that. I mean, I gave a slightly different version of this talk at the conference, and I just altered it slightly because I knew I was talking with people who are mostly students versus at the conference, it was people who are mostly established professionals in this field already. And I've done that with many of the presentations I've given, and yeah, certainly just with some of the writing I've done for different organizations. If you're writing for the science team versus you're writing something for the families of the science team, that looks different. And just, again, knowing your audience and being able to not do double the amount of work. If you just need to shift something slightly for a different audience, then hopefully you don't have to redo the whole thing, so you can be efficient about it.
I will. I do want to make sure I get a chance to ask this question regarding how just you balance your time. This work is really hard, right? And you had that offer from NC State, right? You were considering, I need something stable so I can do this thing, or do I want to just do this thing full time, right? And just focus on that full time. And all of you right now, right? You're all trying to figure this thing out. And I actually want to start with Caroline a little bit and this question goes both of you, but Caroline, if you can go first. You're a postdoc, right? And you have this thing, you're trying to think about it, it's going to become an LLC. How do you manage your time, right? And how do you keep going? That's the fundamental question. How do you keep going, especially when you have all these things that are swimming around and different pressures, right? So Caroline, tell us, how have you made it work from yourself?
Okay. I would say time-wise, and I've said this before, I am not one of those, just get up half an hour early, work half an hour on it every morning. I am not that person, sorry. So instead, I will block off days. Sometimes I'll have like a Saturday where, sorry laundry, but like that, I'll block off entire days where I can really focus and just like get a little deeper about things. And also comics, they take a long time to draw. So it's just a necessity there. And I think for me, when it comes to having, some sort of other project that you kind of have to be passionate about. And I definitely am, like, I can't stop myself from drawing, but also protect that time like you would protect like gym time. It's like, it's for your health in some ways. It's like for your spiritual health, and treat it that way. And enforce boundaries with the people in your life, from work and personal relationships, to make sure they understand that it's important to you.
Very good. Marley?
Yeah, that resonates with me in a big way. One thing that I haven't shared with y'all, I don't think I told you this, Fanuel, but I'm trying to work on writing a book. And I thought I'd wait until later in life when I was an old woman to sit down and write a book, but I realized if I don't start writing it now, I'm not going to remember all the details of all these different crazy adventures I've been on. So I might as well at least start trying to write it now. But it's tough. It's tough to set aside the time to sit down and write, because there's always other stuff to do, and it, exactly what was it, Caroline? Is that who was just speaking? Yeah. That just resonates with me so much. And I think it really does just come down to being disciplined and finding the time. And something I've discovered recently is, I think what is going to be my go-to guaranteed non-distraction writing time now is when I'm on long flights. So I fly pretty frequently, and that's one of the only times that I'm completely disconnected from internet and the distractions of doing stuff around the house or being in the middle of an expedition, or, there's always other things happening. So I think every time I get on a flight now, like the last flight I was on, I spent 3 hours straight just writing, just no distractions, just me and my laptop writing, which was great. So finding little pockets of time for those passion projects, I think, is really important, because I'm the same way. I'm not going to, wake up every morning and be like, okay, now I'm going to spend 1 hour writing, my book or whatever, because some mornings I'm waking up at 4 a.m. I'm in the middle of the ocean, I'm going straight to work, like that's just not feasible. So I don't know. I think, it's good to be disciplined. It's also good to be realistic and find pockets of time where you can. It's okay if it's not the regimented, like 1 hour every day at the same time every day. That doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah, and progress, like be kind to yourselves. Like, and I say that again, be kind to yourself. I've been bad at that at times, where you're just going in 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm still trying to like fix this issue with something, that grant that is, I gotta write this thing, kind of figure it out, right? But be kind to yourself. It's really, really important. This is a marathon. It's a really long marathon. And you just have to take it one step at a time. But burnout, I think, is a real thing in this space. It can happen. So I think if you can schedule time away from it, do it. I've yet to find a way to do that. Even if I'm some beach in Zanzibar, I'm like thinking, and I'm trying to be better. But I think it's good if you can find a way to do that and pace yourself. Other questions, guys, if we still have time. Ryan, you've been very quiet over there. Feel free to jump in at any time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I had a question about funding, but I think that has been answered. So I think just generally, like, is there anything you wish you would have known when you were starting out?
Yeah, I wish I had known in college that I would end up working in science and science communication. I would have taken more science classes. I am really glad that I majored in journalism, because that, those are skill sets I still use every single day, being able to operate a camera and, produce a video from start to finish, and, and just really basic fundamental skills like writing and speaking and clearly communicating with people in general. Those are wonderful skills that I definitely honed in my program in college. But yeah, I wish I had taken more science classes, and I wish someone had told me earlier on, I just had to figure this out, that, you get your degree, you get done with your official program in higher education, and then you think, or at least I thought, okay, I'm done. I got my degree, I've got this experience. And the reality is you are never done. And especially in the type of field I'm in, I am constantly learning new technologies and new ways of doing things. One example I always give people is, if you had told me when I was a 20-year-old college student back in 2009 that one day you're going to fly drones in the middle of the ocean off of a ship, and I would have been like, what's a drone? You know, like back then that was hardly in the area of like in my realm of consciousness. And now that's something I've had to do, is get my FAA drone license and be able to fly drones in really crazy places, because that's a big part of being able to show what our science looks like. So just recognizing that it's a constantly evolving field, and how I film videos or tell stories about science now is going to look different 5 or 10 years from now. It's just going to keep evolving. So yeah, I think that's an important one.
Great question. Others, Britannia, go ahead.
This is, I guess, more of maybe a fun question. Like, over the years, have you just gathered all your gears and, you know, like equipment that you use to do all these expeditions, or do they usually supply them for you when you get on site? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have a backpack full of camera gear, and like I said, I have my own drone, and I have several GoPros, and then I have some Canon DSLRs and lenses. I have 2 MacBook Pro laptops, and I have a bunch of external hard drives that hold all of my footage and photos. Yeah, but it depends again on the organization. One of the, like my next expedition that I'm going on in a few weeks, they do provide a ton of gear. They have the latest and greatest. I mean, this is an organization that just has a ton of money. So they have like the nicest camera gear, like the brand new stuff that just came out this year, whereas my stuff is like 5 years old, right? So it's nice to be able to use other people's gear and not have to rely on my gear all the time. But I, you know, obviously being a professional photographer, I have to have my own gear. So that's a good question.
Yeah, that comes into play when you're thinking about costs as well, right? What is this going to help? What is it going to cost me to operate? Right. And knowing, I think I told you guys before, know your numbers. It's not even about finance, just know the numbers. Even if you get a CPA, right, doing your books and so forth, they're just going to send you a report, right? Or an evaluator, they're going to send you the stuff. You're going to have to make sense of it somehow and know those numbers. So I'm going to ask you, you know, what is your key metric? What do you care about? Like if everything would be stripped away for whatever your initiative is, what do you care most about? Right? You got to be able to answer that quickly and be able to differentiate it from an output to an outcome. So Marley, yes, to your earlier thing, we do put them through this very structured pipeline of thinking a little bit too.
I hope I'm not like horribly contradicting everything I'm teaching them.
No. In fact, this is exactly it. That I think I love what you said, that you are adapting. And I think in your description online, you say, this is something that you've learned and you have embraced, adaptability, right? And because you don't know what you don't know, right? As you go into this, and as you said, you're going to keep learning. So that mentality, I think, is crucial. And I'm curious if you wanted to expand on that in terms of how that has served you in this space, right? As in face of uncertainty, because
yeah,
a lot of it.
No, I mean, I think I could give a whole other talk just on that topic. You hit the nail on the head. Adaptability is an incredibly important trait in the work I do, both in thinking big picture, you know, how am I going to evolve and adapt as a person and as a business, and, you know, in the type of work I do, how am I adapting, but also on a day-to-day basis. And expedition work, when you're working in the middle of the ocean, all kinds of things go wrong. Equipment breaks, the weather gets bad, somebody gets seasick, like there's all kinds of crazy variables that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so being the type of person that can kind of roll with the punches, and, you know, the plan goes out the window, so we're going with plan B or plan C or plan D, and I'm just like, okay, whatever works, you know, like I am not, and I never have been the type of person that's like, no, we have to do it this one way, and if it's not that one way, I'm going to freak out. If that is, you know, if I were that type of person, I would not get invited to go on these research expeditions. So yeah, being adaptable, both in the grand scheme of things, you know, with how I do my business and whatever types of projects I'm working on and all of that, but also being adaptable on a day-to-day basis of just being able to roll with whatever's happening and, being willing to change the plan as we go and figure it out as I go. That's been another big mantra of mine is I'm never going to have everything perfect. I'm never going to know every single thing I need to know, but I'm just going to keep figuring it out as I go.
That's great. I'm out of questions. Well, I have more, but I will refrain. Anybody else wants to jump in and ask away?
What do you say when you're like introducing your initiative to like somebody you potentially want to work with or want to have interest in your project? Like, what's your elevator pitch, I guess?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that's something I've been trying to refine because I do a lot of different things. Like, hi, I'm a professional science communicator. That means I am a photographer, a videographer, and a science writer. But so my elevator pitch, what I've tried to narrow it down to is, I am a professional science communicator. That means I help scientists translate their research into stories and compelling narratives that are accessible to a large and diverse audience. And I specialize in documenting scientific research expeditions at sea. So I spend a lot of time working in the ocean with marine scientists and oceanographers. Or sometimes people are like, oh, you're a photographer, so you do a lot of weddings, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And, I'm just like, I don't want to talk to you, go away. But that's what I would say for somebody I actually want to work for.
My husband's a videographer, and even just, they always assume he can do photos and like audio stuff. It's like, oh, you can just do that because you do video, right? Like, this is different.
Gonna do those nuances. Yeah, if there are no other questions, Marley, where are you off to next? Is there an expedition?
Yeah, I leave in 2.5 weeks to fly to Honolulu, and I will be in port in Honolulu for a few days, and then we will sail out to do a 3-week expedition. I think we're just going to be floating around the Hawaiian archipelago, so not going too far out into the middle of the ocean this time. But about a month in Hawaii altogether. It'll be beautiful, and then 2 months after that, I should be working in the Caribbean with Woods Hole. So that'll be pretty awesome. Lots of tropical islands in the next few months, which is exciting.
Man, I want to go. Tanya, you have the honor of the last question.
Yay. I'll make it an interesting one. So since you travel a lot, like sometimes I go from state to state and it's like culture shock. How do you deal with culture shock, or just like becoming culturally aware of the new places where you're going to be working, and what does that process entail? Does it happen before you go there, or do you have like a week or two? Because you said you were quarantining in Spain for those 2 weeks. Do you educate yourself on the culture, or how does that process work? Because I'm assuming since you work in so many different places, you experience different cultures maybe multiple times a year.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really important question. And I do, anytime I go to a new place, I do my research, and a lot of the organizations I work for are also very cognizant of that, and they will send out information to the whole expedition team ahead of time. These are cultural things you should be aware of. These are things you should or shouldn't do. So I have some help with the research on the front end. And honestly, I have to say, for the culture shock stuff, for me, I've been a traveler for a very long time, even before I started doing expedition work. For me, it's always the coming home that's the hardest. It's the reverse culture shock. And especially after being on a ship for, a month or two, and I've only been around the same 20 or 30 people for however many weeks. And then you suddenly come into port and you're around, just the hustle and bustle of like a major city. I'll never forget, I was at sea for 2 months one time, and then we came into port in San Diego, and we went out in downtown San Diego and went to all these bars and restaurants, and it was just crazy, like just being around so many people. It's a very bizarre experience. And what I've learned is that, you have to take the time to transition and to recognize that you've just had this really big, sometimes life-changing experience when you go out to sea and, work with these people. And then you come, it's just such a contrast. I go from working in the middle of the ocean where everything is like high octane, high pressure, really intense. And then suddenly a day and a half later, I'm home sitting on my couch doing nothing. It's like, how do I, try to balance that? And the reality is after I get done with my super fast-paced expedition work, I need to just rest and I need to take it easy and I need to catch up on sleep and eat healthy food and all of that. But it is definitely a little bit of reverse culture shock every time I get done with being at sea and come back home. So that is a great question. I haven't had many people ask me about that, but that is one of the bigger challenges that I have faced over the years.
Wonderful. We're so excited to just see photos and the growth of ML Parker Media. I'm sure we're going to be running into you at some conference again. I think Science Talk will be my staple, I think, moving forward, showing up there. And with that, guys, this wraps up this week. This lecture today and discussion. So Caroline is, of course, on the Slack. So feel free for any specific questions you want to ping her about. She's an alum. She's a resident. She's many things. She's also we were grad school together way back when. We have multiple conversations about this. But next week we are going to be doing just in time last minute check-in to see if there are any outstanding issues. You want to do a practice run, not the full thing, maybe the intro of your deck. Bring it on. We may have Amy Ains there. She's an expert communicator, and she'll give you tips. There's a video that you need to watch before that session where she goes over a lot of those things. But yeah, pitch day is coming up and I'm super excited. So with that, Marley, this was wonderful. Caroline, wonderful as well. Thank you for stopping by to help with the discussion. And that's it. Let's see here. Stop.